What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here of House Divided. Had a great weekend of conference championships. Let's go over the scoreboard real quick. Obviously, still in a deficit, but had a great weekend. 5-0 on my best bets this week. 2-0 on headlines. My fantasy explosions are 0-2 so far. Still got Chase Brown that's playing later tonight, but we'll update that for next episode. Jose had a good week, but I made up the gap a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, 2-1 best bets. The only one that lost was the one I made with emotion. Headline, I lost the one I made with emotion, and then the other one really disappointed me. How are the Titans losing to Mac Jones and the Jaguars? Fanny Explosion, I went 2-1. Uh, Jordan Addison, thank you for making me look like a genius. Tyrone Tracy as well. I said, jokingly or not, you will never know. I said Tyrone Tracy was better than Saquon, and guess who had more points? Unfortunately, Will Levis did let me down, though. But I'm still in the lead, and that's what matters.
Yeah, that's what matters. Going down to the college football playoffs, there's still a couple NFL regular season, then to the playoffs. So still got time for things to change, especially if I keep performing like I did last week. I doubt it, but you never know. If I could have terrible weeks in a row, I could have great weeks in a row. So
Exactly.
okay.
Gotta keep
Let's
it
go
up.
in. Yeah, let's go into our first subject. Georgia beating Texas yet again. Is it time for Quinn to be benched? Time for Arch for the playoffs, or what are your thoughts on that game?
I'm just going to start off with my thoughts on the game. I hate to say it like this, but I thought Texas was the better team that game. We definitely showed that we have one of the best defenses in the country, definitely the best pass defense in the country. I said it the whole time when Stockton went in. I want him to beat us with his arm. Our defense couldn't do that. They let him run. They let Etienne go. I saw the stat that in both games, every point, it's the kicker and Etienne are responsible. So I was like, that's what I wanted us to stop defensively. Unfortunately, they had their plays on the ground, and with Etienne, they beat us there. And quite frankly, we just couldn't convert in the red zone, and we were sloppy with penalties, and that's what I think it came down to, 11 penalties. It's very hard to win like that. And then you asked if it's time for Texas to turn it over to Arch Manning. Well, I think Arch Manning is going to be a great quarterback, and he could be a great quarterback for us this year even. I do think you have to stick with Quinn. That loss was not on Quinn. The interception and the completion percentage scares some people. He was making some great throws. He was very poised in the pocket. That loss was not on him. And I do think we're best off with Quinn going forward.
There was a lot to unpack with this game. Obviously, Carson Beck injury helped the Bulldogs. Kind of weird to think about that, but it did. Gunner came in. He brought that running aspect that Carson Beck didn't have, and that really changed the game a little bit. He had some good passes here and there, third down, but like I said, like his running game and ETN really changed the tide, especially in overtime and end of the fourth quarter. But I don't know. I don't think Quinn played very good. There was a couple interceptions that were dropped by Georgia players where it was like just the Georgia player hit him in his hands and he dropped them. I think he got saved in that aspect by just defensive players dropping the ball. I think he had not a terrible game, but he missed some throws here and there. He obviously had costly turnovers and he could have way more turnovers. And I'm not saying Arch would have done better because we haven't seen Arch in that type of game yet, but I think y'all's defense played good. I think the whole offense as a whole was a problem, but I can attribute it back to Quinn a little bit making bad decisions. And honestly, he should have had 3 to 4 interceptions in that game. Watching.
I honestly attribute most of the offensive struggles not to Quinn at all. I mean, sure, at some point you have to give him blame, but I think that blame comes from they were throwing so much because there were no holes in the run game. Quintavion Wisner was getting stopped at the line of scrimmage almost every play. So I attribute it to that.
I agree with that. I think
Um,
you guys weren't running enough, but when you did, it didn't work. So I can see why you leaned on more. But
even that, Quinn led enough opportunities. I mean, Bert Auburn missed 2 kicks. He can't do that. So, you obviously you don't want to be in a situation where it comes down to your kicker. When he misses 2 kicks, it's still very tough to the team.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway,
Good news for us. If we play them again, it's almost impossible to lose 3 times to the same team in a year.
I don't know. We'll see. It would be you guys would have to match up in the national championship, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway, a team with championship aspiration in the Ducks taking care of business against Penn State. Penn State did look good in that loss, put up some points. Could they make a run? And is Oregon the favorites to win it all?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great game we watched. Primetime slot, a lot of us were hoping it would be the SEC, but as we get it every year, at least this time it wasn't Purdue in there. Penn State looked really good. I liked what I saw from Aller. Obviously, the interception at the end is tough. But honestly, I don't think they can win all the way. I do think they win this first game. I do think they beat Boise when they do play. I do think they could have a good game with Georgia once they make it to that game. But after what I saw this weekend, I do think they would fall in the semis against Georgia. And then for OU or U of O, Oregon, I think they have to be the favorites right now. A big win against the number 3 team ranked in the country. 45 points. You showed what you could do offensively. And we've seen some games that they are capable of making the stops. They had the interception at the end. So I just think they have to be the favorites at this point.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Penn State probably, along with you guys, have the easiest path to the semifinals. I think Penn State has it maybe a little bit easier, facing SMU at home and then facing Boise State if they take care of business. I think they take care of both teams and have a kind of an easy march to the semis. And then we'll see who they play, but I think that's when they max out. I think Oregon, like you said, is the favorites, undefeated, beating a lot of good teams. I think a concern with Oregon is allowing Penn State has been good offensively, but not against good defense competition. So I think it is concerning they allowed Penn State to score, 35 points?
37 points.
Yeah, it looked like every drive Drew Aller was done. I think that is a concern for Oregon, especially if they run into better offenses like Texas, like Ohio State, like some of these teams that have more firepower. Even though Penn State has Tyler Warren and Drew Aller and Wallace and those boys, I think in relative to some of these other offenses, they're not as explosive. So that's a little bit of concern. But I just love that Oregon team, especially that offense. Those 2 running backs, Whittington and James, the 1-2 punch. Kind of hard. I've never seen anyone stop them yet. We got Tez Johnson, a little fast wideout, had a big game against Penn State this weekend. Evan Stewart was quiet. I think he only had 1 target, but he's still a special receiver. And those tight ends with Ferguson and forgot the other guy's name, but he scored 2 touchdowns. So they just have a lot of weapons. Dylan Gabriel, along with Cam Ward, Shadur, is the top quarterback in the country, obviously responsible for the most touchdowns all time. So he's just that Oregon, and Dan Lanning, a great head coach. They have to be the favorites, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about we just talked about the number 1 team. Let's talk about the number 12 team in this playoff. The Clemson Tigers, big walk-off win at the end. They were up heavy early. They allowed a comeback. What did we think of that game from both SMU, Clemson, and what do we see going forward with both these teams?
I think it was a good game. I think, what was I going to say? It was a great game. Obviously, Clemson started off really fast. SMU kind of slow. People were thinking like, oh, maybe SMU doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs. We're getting killed by Clemson. But then the second half rolls around. Kevin Jennings starts doing the ball, running the ball, and they really take over and tie up that game. And it took a 50-something yard field goal sneaking through for Clemson to pull it out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, I do think that's what ended up getting SMU in the playoff and not Bama. But I saw enough from Clemson to be like, I'm not the most – obviously, I think I would have picked basically from the matchups available. They would have been my second choice. I think I would have rather played SMU. But I'm very content with the Clemson matchup. I do think it'll be a good game. Obviously, a homecoming for Cade Klubnik. So that'll be interesting to see. We'll obviously get into that more in the weeks to come. But good win from them to get into the playoff.
Yeah, and kind of Dabo kind of shutting for a minute. Those people saying like, "Oh, you need to do the transfer portal and stuff." He's like, "Hey, we're still winning the conference. We're still making the playoffs. Why do I need to change?" But yeah, great win from Clemson. Cade had a big game. Wesco, it wasn't Antonio Williams this week. It was more Wesco, and he was really dotting up SMU. And then Kevin Jennings the other way, especially in the second half, was really dotting up Clemson. I think it was a great game. What you love to see, game going down to the wire, a lot of playoff implications. Just a great game all around.
Yeah, I agree with most of with basically everything you said. So let's take it down to the other big conference championship we saw this weekend. Arizona State in a dominant win over ISU. They get their bye week mostly because of the Clemson win. What do we think of Arizona State going forward? Can they make the upset if they end up playing Texas? What do we think?
I like that team a lot. I think not to win it all or whatever, but I just like the demeanor of that team. I like their head coach. Honestly, before that game, I haven't really watched a lot of them this season, but obviously it was the only game on at 11, so I turned it on, had a little money in that game. But honestly, Scatterbo had a big game, proving he's one of the best running backs in the country. He said he should win the Heisman. I don't completely agree with that, but he had a big game. And honestly, it just shows the confidence that team has. Their quarterback played great, running and throwing the ball. And that defense obviously started a little shaky, but then really clogged up that Iowa State offense, who has been somewhat high-powered this season. So I think it was a very impressive win, the only championship game that was kind of a blowout. So I think it was very impressive, and I think they could make some noise. I think they could push Texas or Clemson, whoever wins that game. I'm expecting y'all to win, but I think they can push y'all a little bit. But if they can run the ball, I think they can compete with anyone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just the game, it was close early on for a little bit, and then Arizona State took over. Great game from Levitt, 3 touchdowns in the air, 1 on the ground from him. Obviously, the story of the game was Cam Scatterbo's 200 yards of scrimmage, 3 touchdowns. So great game from him. Again, like you said, I disagree with the Heisman comment, but honestly, just the story with this team is how they were all picked last to be last in the Big 12, that they couldn't compete, and now they're the champions, and they have some of the most momentum going forward. On the other side, I was disappointed from what I saw from Iowa State. I thought this would be a good game, a close game. I know Rocco Becht was banged up at one point in the game, but still not what you wanted to see from them. Now they just have to look forward to next year. I don't know if they'll be the same with the graduating class, but overall, just a great program-defining win for ASU, I'll say.
Yeah, I think they were plus 100,000 preseason to win the conference. So if you bet on them preseason, congratulations! Wow. But yeah, no one expected this coming in to the season. So really a Cinderella story for them, and maybe they could keep it going. You never know. Momentum does a lot for a team, and confidence does a lot for a team.
Yeah.
But, we're talking about what they can do in the playoffs. The CFP, the playoff rankings, got dropped Sunday morning before the NFL games. What are your reactions of that? Obviously not a lot changed from championship weekend, but
no, I mean, only change that had to happen. I'm for most part, I'm going to say I agree completely with the way it turned out. I obviously think Oregon had to be number 1, Georgia number 2, 3 and 4. I think is the right order for those 2 conference championships: Boise State and Arizona State, and obviously Clemson should have been last. Obviously the bigger debate was in the middle. How would you order them? Would Notre Dame be ahead because they only have 1 loss? Would it be Texas or Penn State because they had 1 loss? Would you punish them for a championship game? We obviously saw how that turned out. And, I mean, honestly, I could say that Penn State and Texas, even though they lost, might be the biggest winners, because I think it's better off playing Clemson and Arizona State and playing Boise State and playing SMU than you would be better off if Oregon turns out playing Ohio State and Georgia Notre Dame. So that's just an initial thought from that. And then we'll talk about SMU Bama later. I want to hear your first thoughts on the reaction.
Well, we can go straight into the SMU Bama because that's my
Okay.
reactions. Because not a lot changed. Just winning and losing changed the seeds for especially Georgia and Texas. But I think it set a good precedent that you don't get punished that much for losing the conference championship. Because I think if they put Bama in, a lot of teams would not want to be in that conference championship game, especially if they can't afford a loss. So I think it set a good precedent in that fact. But something else I think they need to consider, especially we'll see what happens. Obviously, I'm not going to say, oh, Boise State can't win. But if we see in the second round, Boise State and Arizona State just get completely killed, I think they have to look at maybe having them have those automatic spots in the playoffs, but having once you have the 12 teams reseed them, they don't get automatic buys. So we don't have I think we'll be interested to see if that does occur. If Texas kills Arizona State and Penn State kills Boise State, I think they would have to consider that because how can the 5 and 6 seed get a better draw than the 1 seed?
For me, I do think SMU was the right choice. I think they set a great precedent, not just in the SMU game with the conference championship punishment. I think the fact that Texas and Penn State didn't fall behind a team like Notre Dame shows that as well. So I really liked that from the committee. And for me, you mentioned the reseed. I really like the conference all getting a bye. It's like the NFL, and I like that about the divisions. I like that. What I would do is, so that it's more fair and the best way to win the 1 seed, I would do the seeding every week the same way the NFL does, so that 1 always plays the lowest seed, and then the ones in the middle would play each other. That's how I would personally do it if it was up to me. I know a lot of people campaign for what you said, though.
Yeah, I'll take either, to be honest. I just think Oregon got really disadvantaged by that, and obviously Texas and Penn State had a great season. They deserve these flowers and not a tough draw, but I think they just got more lucky than Oregon, and Oregon went undefeated and won the second best conference in the country. But you never know. Hey, Boise State might pull off an upset. Arizona State might pull off an upset. So you never know. I think also something is these Bama fans, these South Carolina, these Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's tweeting out some stuff. You just gotta stay quiet. If you lose 3 games, you can't
lost 3 games.
You got robbed. You're grateful if they put you in, but you can't say you got robbed when you lose 3 games. That's how I view this whole dilemma. But I think the rankings based on the 12 teams they put in, I think it's correct.
I think it's the right order. I think it's the right order as well.
For the most part, honestly, the seeding is correct, except for what I mentioned earlier. But we'll have to see how that plays out. But speaking of Boise State, we mentioned them here a couple times. They have a great running back. Is Ashton Jeanty the Heisman after he had a big performance, not to his standards, but still a big performance in a conference championship?
Early in the year, or not early in the year, obviously, but when we first started getting the Jeanty hype, I was all on the Jeanty train. Then the last 2 weeks, I was on the Travis Hunter train. It's been a lot of flip-flopping. But right now, I do think it's Ashton Jeanty. I think when you compare his stats to former Heisman running backs, he's better. He's the closest thing we've gotten to Barry Sanders. And he took his team to the 3 seed in the playoff, which is just something that Colorado couldn't do with Travis Hunter, even though he was playing on both sides. And while that's amazing, impressive, and it'll be a top 3 pick for sure, I do think Jeanty should win the Heisman because it's just the impact and what he did to that team. He was carrying.
Yeah, I think I was Travis Hunter. I maybe still be leaning that way, but something interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
You guys drop in the comments. We'll put out a poll who you guys think should win the Heisman, Jeanty or Hunter, because those are the 2 main ones that are going for it. But I think something interesting to consider is if you put Travis Hunter on Boise State and put Ashton Jeanty on Colorado, how those teams would fare. I think Colorado would make the playoffs, and I think Boise State will kind of they would win their conference, but they'll be not as high regarded as they are now. So I think that's something to consider when you guys pick your Heisman. But I'm honestly, I'm going to stick with Travis Hunter for now. But I wouldn't be mad if Jeanty wins it because he had an amazing season. And his team did as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's flip-flop. I could see it going either way. I would be okay with it going either way. like I said, Saturday or actually Friday before the game, I was all on. I was Travis Hunter at the moment. I'd been Travis Hunter for a while, and I don't know. Just now, I'm thinking some of the stats I've seen, some of the people I've seen campaigning. I think a lot of that's pointing to just what JT doing being a little bit more impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, both have impressive seasons, but
Absolutely.
We'll see who they pick as well. Someone who deserves a shout out is obviously he's getting some flowers, and he's probably going to be in that stage, but not really considered. Is Dillon Gabriel leading that number one team in the country? I think he had 30-something total touchdowns and 3 interceptions, so he had a great season as well his last year. Obviously, leading the Oregons to undefeated and in the 1 seed. But any other season he could have taken it home, but not this season with Genty and Hunter being unique talents that they are.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what is from Gabriel? Discarded by OU, and great way to turn it around and lead the number one team in the country.
Yeah. That concludes our segment here of college football. Let's move on to the NFL. The Rams had a massive win against the Bills despite Josh Allen's Superman game. Are they NFC contenders?
Yeah, I mean the Bills and Josh Allen. They just looked like the Joe Burrow's Bengals. That was the prime time AFC team. They just beat the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago. The momentum was all with them. Josh Allen's the MVP, and what happens? Puka Nacua happens. Cooper Kupp happens. Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Sean McVay. With those names, I think they can beat any team at any time. They were close against Detroit earlier in the year. And I think if they can – I think they're only 1 game behind Seattle right now. They could still pull out the division. If not, I think they're also only 1 game behind Washington. And if they can definitely get themselves into the NFC playoffs, I do think they're a dangerous team that on the right week can beat any team.
Yeah, I agree. I think – the Rams, with those 2 guys that can get open on 1-1 coverage, and it's hard to double either one of them because the other one will eat you up. Yep. They can beat anyone. That pass attack is very dangerous, probably top in the league. And the only thing that I think they do sneak in the playoffs, whether they win their division or get in a wild card spot, the only thing is depends who they draw. If they have to play up north, I wouldn't pick them like outdoors in a snowy game, but anything else, I think they can beat anyone, like you said. I'm not too concerned about the Bills. Obviously, Josh Allen had a crazy game. That defense just wasn't ready to stop. It was a hard day to travel after a Sunday night game, cross country. So I'm not too concerned. I think they'll bounce back. That defense will start playing better. And if Josh Allen keeps playing like he did, watch out.
Yeah, first quarterback to 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, and to lose. So
is it crazy to say he's now a favorite for the MVP, even though he lost that game? Saquon had kind of a quiet week. He had that big.
I think he is definitely the MVP favorite right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I think he's definitely the MVP favorite. I think Saquon and Lamar are up there 2 and 3. And honestly, I think Darnold probably just snuck his way up to 4.
Yeah, with that also big game, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy game. Crazy week. Speaking of crazy, the Chiefs do it again. I don't know how they keep doing it. I know the third down percentage they have is crazy, but the doink, I don't know how you explain it. What do we think of the Chiefs? They're getting closer and closer to clinching. What do we think? What's next for the Chargers? What's next for the Chiefs? And overall, what do we think of the game?
Chiefs again with some black magic type stuff, a crazy field goal to win the game. Mahomes leading them down the field with game-winning drive. Saw a clip today where there was a bunch of penalties on the Chiefs they didn't call. They were minuscule, but still could have affected the game, even if they called one of them. Some holding, some tripping, some blocking the back on that last drive. But I think, I'm impressed by the Chargers. I know we both think they're a great team, but to go into Arrowhead at night and push the Chiefs the way it did, the Chiefs needing that lucky field goal, I think the Chargers I'm very convinced on the Chargers now, and I think they maybe, again, in the playoffs, they can actually beat the Chiefs if they match up, to be honest. But I think they're a great defensive team, great coach team, and just a very well-disciplined team.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they're starting to look like a Michigan team a little bit, but with the Justin Herbert at quarterback. So I'd like that from them, and obviously just give them more time, and I think they'll be very good. I think definitely they can beat Kansas City if they meet again. So I agree. That's what's next for the Chargers, and I mean next for the Chiefs. They'll probably somehow win on a blocked punt in the Super Bowl or something. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I guess. I don't know what's next for the Chiefs. It's crazy.
I think something to also know is Ladd McConkey did not play in that
Ladd
game.
McConkey didn't play, and he cemented himself as wide receiver 1 for the Chargers, and you could tell he was missing yesterday.
Yeah, so I think if they have him, they could have won that game, but obviously you can't say that. But yeah, the Chargers are going to make some noise in the playoffs, and the Chiefs, we'll see. Maybe they switch it back on offensively in the playoffs. But I mean, good to see Pacheco back. He ran the ball pretty well, but I would be a little concerned if I'm a Chiefs fan. But obviously, you're still 12-1, and probably going to get that 1 seed, play all your games in Kansas City, and we know what Mahomes can do in the playoffs. So I still think they're the favorites.
Yeah, I do too. They definitely are. They're definitely the top contenders for the Super Bowl. But there's another team that I'm looking at. They're in the NFC, and I'm wondering, like, they started looking like contenders, but everybody said they're pretenders because of what the names on the team. They didn't have the biggest names, especially at quarterback. But now he's working his way up to the MVP conversation. 5 touchdowns last week. Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings, how real are they? Are they only playoff contenders? Are they Super Bowl contenders? Do you think they're just pretenders? What do you think's going on in Minnesota?
I think they're for real. I think that Sam Darnold has either cemented his job in Minnesota or if he can find one somewhere else where they need a quarterback. He's finding Justin Jefferson. He's finding Hawkinson a bit more. He's finding Addison explosion game, like you mentioned earlier with your fantasy explosion. That pass attack is deadly, even though you don't expect it. You expect it because they have Justin Jefferson, but not with that quarterback, especially going into the season. People didn't want to even pick him in fantasy because they were scared of the quarterback play, but that's not the issue. I would like to see they've had some good running games, but especially in this time of weather and in this type of playoff football, they need to run the ball a little bit more and establish their game there. Their defense is really good. They can create turnovers. Their pass defense is somewhat concerning, but I think they can make it. I don't think they'll make it to the Super Bowl, but they could upset some people and they could really make a push to the NFC Championship game. And I think this upcoming game coming up soon with Detroit decides the division. And I think it's in Detroit. I'm going to pick the Lions because, wow, they're rolling and they're the best team in the league. But I think the Vikings could put up a good fight.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm just going to look at it. You said like how they need to change their way to play the game in the playoffs and the weather. Not change it, but adapt.
But they need to be able to do it because I haven't seen except 1, maybe 2 games of them like really running it on a team. And I think you need to be able to win games either way if they shut down your pass.
I do think so. That's definitely true. You mentioned the weather, though, which I don't think will really be an issue. The only place they'd have to really weather about the weather is maybe Philly and maybe Green Bay, but don't worry about Green Bay because you'd be higher seeded than them. Yeah. And Detroit's a dome, and every other place is warm. Seattle. I mean, it wouldn't really snow that much there, and then Tampa Bay is warm. And then I do think they can definitely make a good run. Their first game will either be Seattle or Tampa Bay, who I think they're definitely a better team than both of those teams. I do think they're on that same tier as Philadelphia and Detroit, though. And I do think they could pull out a win. I do feel like Detroit has slowed down a little since all of those injuries. I mean, how could they not? So I do think they're up there as well.
Yeah, I think Detroit and then Philly and the Vikings are a little below until we see Detroit falter more than they have. I think they're still clear and favorites. But Philadelphia concerned me a little bit this week at home against the Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers have been playing better football. Bryce Young's been dealing. He was leading them down the field and then threw. He was leading them down the field and then couldn't get it done, but he really marched them a couple 50 yards or something. He threw a pick late in the game that was also crucial. Just silly mistakes, but Bryce Young's really been playing way better since coming back from being benched. But I don't know, Philly, it concerned me seeing them struggle against the Panthers that much.
Yeah, did you see the guy who bet $3 million on Philly?
Yeah.
And how he's like, he needs to get a signed Xavier Legette jersey and hang it up in his house.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what a year or not a year, but a great couple of weeks from Bryce Young. I heard someone say, you're not ready for this conversation, but Bryce Young's been better than Stroud for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, he has been.
Yeah. So yeah, he's been looking good for him. Let's take it.
Sorry, one more thing on the Bryce Young. I watched a lot of that game because I had a bet in that game, and I think like something I saw that was very like when he used to get pressured, he would like crumble up and like kind of just take the sack. But now he's moving in the pocket and moving outside the pocket and throwing the ball accurately when he's running, which is what we saw at Bama and what we expected when he came into the NFL. I think he got his confidence back. I think he's trusting his coaches more. He's trusting his receiver. He's finding Thielen a lot. And I think this is a great turnaround from Bryce Young when we were all calling him the biggest bust ever. But I think I'm not here to call him, he's back to what we thought he is.
I have a question. Did the Panthers fleece the Bears on the trade?
No, not yet. I won't say that yet, but I have seen some, especially in that game yesterday. It's the first time I watched a mostly full Panthers game in a while, and he was stealing the ball. But anyway, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, let's take things out west in what might be the most close division in football right now. I'd say that we're in a position where all four teams have a chance at the division. You have the Cardinals and Niners at 6 and 7, I believe. The Rams at 7 and 6, and the Seahawks leading at 8 and 5. Who's your pick to win the division?
This one's tricky. I'm not going to go Cardinals. I'm not going to go Niners between the Rams and Seahawks. Obviously, the Seahawks have a leg up, but I think they still have to play again, the Rams and Seahawks do, and I think the Rams win that game. But I think they both teams make the playoffs, but honestly, I'm going to pick the Rams. I think they're going to continue to roll. They've already played a hard schedule. They're tested. Their schedule gets a little bit lighter, nothing crazy. They still have hard schedule remaining, but I think they'll take care of business and win that division.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's the Rams. I actually really like the Seahawks this year, but it's the Rams. It's Puka Nacua. It's Cooper Kupp. It's Sean McVay, and I'm gonna have to take them.
Yeah, but I think it'll be a tiebreaker thing. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how as the weeks come down, and it'll be interesting to see maybe San Francisco can pick it up, but they're still very injured. But I doubt it.
Yeah, well, San Francisco is going to be very interesting to look at. Even if they don't come back in, they could very much be playing spoiler to a lot of teams as they get better and healthier. So they'll be interesting to look at. Absolutely. Let's talk about a team who can only be spoiled if they win. They want to lose right now. They want that number one pick. Who do we think is worse, the Raiders or the Giants?
I'm going to go with – all right, let me talk about the Raiders real quick. They looked like they were coming back and going to pull off an upset against the Bucs. And then there was a play in a game where Aiden O'Connell fumbled the snap, and that's when I knew the tanking was real because it was when they had all the momentum. My roommate called it the Shadur, the play call, because they want Shadur, and they were about to start leading. So let's just fumble the snap here and call the Shadur, fumble the snap, and let's get a high pick. But I think the Giants are just the worst team. I don't see anything good to this team except maybe that D line, and Malik Neighbors. But besides that, this team's pretty bad, and I think they just want a quarterback. I mean, they have no one else. They let go of the guy they signed for multi-millions of dollars. So they just either want Shadur or Cam Ward or someone. So I think they're worse, and they're going to lose out, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm going to have to agree. I mean, with Aiden O'Connell as the Raiders quarterback, I absolutely would have said Giants are 100% worse. But with Desmond Ridder, the debate gets a little closer. I'm still going to have to lean Giants, though, because I do think they've given up a lot more than the Raiders have. The Raiders still have, at least with Aiden O'Connell, they were showing a little bit of fight against Kansas City. You could see it with the momentum building against Tampa. The Giants just don't have anything. I hate to say it. I think the Raiders are ahead on tiebreaker right now, so they'd have the number 1 pick. And I really don't see either team winning. So unfortunately for the Giants, who I think are worse, I do think they end up getting second choice.
Yeah, but hey, sometimes that works out, like the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young situation. So,
yeah.
But I don't know, it'll be interesting who. I think the Raiders are going to go with Shadur, but we'll get to that when the moment arises. But anyway, that concludes our episode here of House Divided. Tune in for our episode on Friday. Obviously, there's no college games this weekend, but we will be doing our playoff prediction of the set bracket and preview the NFL games that lie ahead. Thank you, guys.